one of the things that I really like about this chapter that a number of you guys have touched on already is the focusing on the little successes and how important it is to focus on the little successes, because I think no matter where we are on that spectrum of what kind of how rigidly we tend to hold ourselves to accomplishing certain goals, and being aware of which goals we consider worthy goals and which things we sort of discount, right? So I like that he emphasizes the fact that even just taking a breath is an accomplishment. Being alive is an accomplishment. So just by being aware, you have accomplished something. And I think now that's a really important thing for a lot of us to have access to that idea, because our lives have changed so much. I know a lot of us are still working in our regular jobs, but a lot of us also aren't. And so one of the things in general that I see people sort of struggling with is this sense of fulfillment or accomplishment or purpose. If they're not working, or they're at home, or they can't interact with people, like a lot of us get a sense of accomplishment or connection with interacting with people or helping other people in a very sort of, physical way that we're not able to do now. And this chapter just helps to emphasize the fact that we do accomplish multiple things throughout the day, and learning to focus on those tiny successes is really, really important to supporting our mental well-being when we're in sort of challenging situations where we maybe are facing obstacles to reaching some sort of really high goal. And becoming aware of how our perceptions about how successful we are being in our daily life impact our well-being and our mental resources, and how much learning to take gratitude in the really tiny, tiny things, like Kathleen was saying, just noticing, a little tiny moments throughout the day that we can be grateful for, and little tiny successes like making the bed, making your coffee, taking a breath, going for a walk. All of those little things, they're just small ways that we can reinforce positive habits in our mind through things that we do every day that we sort of take for granted. And that helps us develop, those tiny tasks that we accomplish in becoming aware and learning to be grateful for those tiny, tiny things make huge strides towards allowing us to create new habits in our mind, whether we realize that right now or not. I think that's one of the powerful things about the method that he's suggesting. Instead of making these really high, kind of lofty goals, focusing on the tiny, tiny things that we're already successful at, allows us to create positive reinforcement in our mind all day long. So we don't even necessarily have to make a goal like we made last week, right? We can just sort of reframe how we're considering ourselves successful in life. And then when we feel successful, we're more likely to follow through on things, He's talking about in the chapter how important it is to experience pleasure and to give yourself the opportunity to experience pleasure. And then he just acknowledges that for a lot of people, that's a big obstacle, because we have these stories around it that either have to do with our self-worth or the appropriateness of you feeling pleasure. Really, that's sort of the two main things that I noticed he was talking about. So, the first is to just become aware of where your blocks are to experiencing pleasure when you read about that. So the examples that he gave were things like, when you think about this idea of allowing yourself to experience pleasure, do thoughts come up like, I don't deserve to experience pleasure, or I don't deserve to feel this way? Or do thoughts come up that, especially right now with what's going on, if other people in my life are suffering, it's not okay for me to feel pleasure, and just to notice if those kinds of things are coming up so that you can work with them, because your ability to allow yourself to experience pleasurable things is vital to your well-being, which is vital to your mental health, which is vital to your ability to be present with other people and to take care of them, and also to take care of yourself. So he sort of circles back to the self-compassion idea, which is what he started the whole book with, right? And he also acknowledges that life can be painful. And so what do you do if life is really painful to you and that's a block for you feeling pleasure? And so this is sort of what Sandy, I think, is pointing to, is what he says is that a lot of the obstacle that comes up in our capacity to allow ourselves, or even just to be able to experience something pleasurable if we're having painful experiences, especially that are ongoing, is that idea of resistance that I think we've talked about before. So when things are uncomfortable or we're feeling painful, we have a tendency, right, because it doesn't feel good to be in pain, to resist it, and to try to make it go away, or to deny it, or to wish that it were a different way. And that takes up a lot of our mental capacity and a lot of our emotional capacity. So what he's saying is that the pain will be there. I mean, you're living life, and life will sometimes have painful things associated with it. And if you're experiencing that, the sort of remedy to help yourself begin to bring some pleasure into that experience is to just accept that the pain is there, and not to push it away so much, because then that frees up part of your mind to be able to allow yourself to notice the beautiful flower, or to notice how lovely your cup of tea tastes, or to notice the nice gesture that you saw somebody doing for somebody else at the grocery store, and taking pleasure in those tiny things. So that if you're finding yourself, kind of immersed in painful emotions or a painful life situation, that you can allow yourself some brain space by just acknowledging that it's there, accepting that it's there, and then kind of not denying the pain, right? He very specifically points that out. It's not about denying that something's painful. It's just accepting it and saying, yes, it's painful, and not creating a whole story around that, right? So I saw some little meme thing going around on Facebook that had a little rain cloud on it. I don't know if you guys saw this. I shared it on my Facebook page, and it said something like, it was giving examples of what acceptance is and what acceptance is not. And so there was a rain cloud, and it said it's raining. And then acceptance just says, yep, it's raining. And not acceptance said, it's raining, I hate when it rains. It's raining, I wish it wasn't raining. It's raining, I wish it would stop raining, right? It's like all these stories that we make around it. Acceptance isn't denying that it's raining. Acceptance is just saying, yep, it's raining, and then just stopping there and moving on with your life, and allowing yourself to sort of also have other experiences. I think what happens a lot of times with painful emotions and painful circumstances is that we allow that to occupy the entirety of our mental landscape, right? And it's not that you deny the pain, like I was saying before. You just accept that it's there, and then you allow other things to also be present alongside of that. And so what would it be like to experience, to acknowledge that something isn't ideal, or that sometimes feels uncomfortable, but also there's all of these other beautiful, amazing things that are happening all the time. And it's that way, in those little ways, that we slowly begin to heal ourselves and allow ourselves to learn how to become resilient in difficult situations. I think that's one of the keys that he's starting to introduce here, because right, the book is about developing resilience. So you be resilient if you don't encounter difficult circumstances, right? Like, the point is that life is hard sometimes and we have a lot of stressors. So how do we live within that in a way that allows us to continually be working to develop and increase our capacity for resilience and finding an internal pleasure? You know, this is sort of what he refers to in this chapter too, is that the more we can do these things, the more we can be grateful for the tiny things, like Kathleen was saying, the more that we can take pleasure internally with all of the tiny things that are going on all the time alongside everything else that's happening in life, the more we have an internal source of pleasure. So the less we have to look outside of ourselves for that. And that's how we really begin to develop our internal resources. So I really liked that whole discussion. Yeah, and I think if we sort of extrapolate on this whole idea to, you know, what happens in the world around us, so even just beyond our small circle of life or the smaller circle of our mind, right, which sometimes seems like a really big circle, this definitely can be extended to these ideas of our preferences, right, and our judgments about what is going on. And, you know, we're talking here about all of these ideas in the context of internal and emotional resilience, so that we can maintain a state of calm, happiness, and internal strength or grit. And it's an interesting thing to think about, well, how might these ideas apply to how I'm interacting with, perceiving, and, you know, attituding, you know, having an attitude about what's going on in the world right now, and all of the different opinions about what's going on in the world right now, and what my opinion is about what's going on in the world right now. And you know, how we can just bring a sense of acceptance to that, because like Valentina was saying, there are only so many things that are under our control, right? And so it's not about denying anything that's happening. It's about what's effective, right? What's effective for you to be effective. So it's important to be aware of what's happening and to not deny what's happening. But it's also important to accept this how it is now. It doesn't mean it's going to be like this forever. This is how it is now, without creating a whole story around whether I like how it is or whether I have an opinion about how it is, and what my opinion is about what other people's opinion is and what other people are doing about it. Just accept this is how it is now. What do I do? And if you can accept that, then that creates space in our mind to then, you know, harness our grit and go forward and take positive action. And I think, you know, what happens a lot when we start to see tumultuous situations in the world is we can either get really caught up in the turmoil of that, right, and then feel disempowered, or we just get so caught up in the turmoil of it and the opinions about it that we don't actually do anything helpful, or we don't have the capacity to do anything helpful. And you know, right now, I think that that's a really kind of a practical concept for us to bring to our life experience in the context of this world situation that we're in right now, because there's a lot of uncertainty and there are a lot of things that we practically just don't really have control over, right? So, and there are a lot of things that, you know, rightfully bring up of strong emotions. And so just learning how to bring some acceptance around that and to find small pleasures, right, to help soothe ourselves during that time, and to begin to allow ourselves to develop these more positive habits so that we can coexist in a state of inner harmony with all of the chaos that's going on around us and within all of these things that seem to be outside of our direct control, so that we can kind of stay present with ourselves and stay centered, and then find an internal source of happiness that then we can offer within our small circle of influence and feel empowered in that way. If we're using the word acceptance, instead of the idea that acceptance means that you don't try to change it, or that you're approving of it in some way or something like that, for you to just embrace it by saying this belongs to, right? Instead of pushing it away, you're just saying this belongs to, so that you can kind of appreciate the role that that experience has in the bigger picture. Before you fall asleep every night, when you're laying in bed and you're not asleep yet, just think of 3 things that you appreciate. Any 3 things. They don't have to be big, they can be really tiny, but you're not really doing anything else, so it's not like a big time commitment. You don't have to keep a journal of all your appreciations. Just while you're laying in bed, before you fall asleep, think of 3 things that you appreciate, and then go to sleep with that in your mind. Come to your breath. And just relax the body. And bring to mind someone that you really appreciate. What are some of the things that this person has given to you? Think about those and list them off in your mind. Let these memories become feelings of thankfulness, and let those feelings sink into you. Now, think about what has been fortunate in your life. For example, your natural talents, when or where you were born, who your parents were, some kind of good luck that has come to you. Anything about your life that has been fortunate for you. Anything at all. And without taking away from your own efforts and how those contributed, open to the feeling of thankfulness for your good fortune. Open to the feeling of thankfulness for what has been fortunate in your life. Now consider the world of nature, the flowers, the trees, the flocks of birds, all the life in the ocean. And in your mind, see what happens when you say to yourself, thank you. Let your thanks fill your heart and ripple outward. Now consider some of the many objects that you use in a day that have been made by or invented by other people, often long ago. Wheels, safety pins and smartphones, soy sauce, streetlights and stop signs, zippers and belt buckles, all handed to you, gifted to you, deserving of your thanks. Let your thanks fill your heart and ripple outward. Now think about all the things that have happened to bring you into being. All the things that happen to bring our Milky Way galaxy into being, our solar system, our own sweet planet, life on our planet, the human species on our planet, your grandparents being born and having children who met and then had you. So many things came together to bring you into being. Looking upstream at the river of time, you see so many things to be thankful for. Allow your thanks to fill your heart and ripple outward. Feel what that thankfulness feels like in your body. And let it soak into you as you soak into this feeling of thankfulness. And you can either choose to just stay here in this absorption of thankfulness, or if you want, while you hold this feeling of thankfulness in the body, while you allow yourself to be thankful, while you allow yourself to become this feeling of thankfulness, you can invite a peripheral awareness of something that you maybe have a harder time feeling thankful for. And while you are thankful for all of these amazing things we just went through, you can begin to notice how you can hold that feeling of thankfulness and acceptance for the hard things at the same time, allowing both of them to be present. Accepting both of them as part of your experience. And then allowing your feeling of thankfulness to touch this other idea. And to heal it. Maybe it can bring you to a point where you can find things about that situation to be thankful for. Or maybe it's just a thankfulness for your ability to accept what is and to hold a space of thankfulness for all of the other things that also exist. And to notice how that ability helps you to persevere, to find inner strength and hope, inner pleasure and happiness. Taking a few breaths here. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay, that's a wrap. So remember, this week, before you fall asleep while you're laying in bed, think of 3 things that you appreciate. And if you're so inclined, you can write them down and share them with us next week, because it's always nice to hear things like that. And I would encourage you, depending on what your task was for the week, if it's helping you to continue on with that and keep working with that. So it might be that you find it would be helpful to be flexible and readjust what your thing was, right? So Kathleen, I'll just point you out. So maybe you decide, on the days I don't have to get up at 4 a.m. to take everybody's temperature, I'll do this. And on the days when I do have to do that, which I wasn't thinking of before, I'll do this instead, you know? So just adjust that, because it would be a nice opportunity for us to use this support and this experience that we're working with to develop new positive helpful habits for us. And it does take persistence for those to become natural, and to really continue to focus on what feels good and rewarding about following through on those things. So